Hey everyone, welcome to Neighbor Science, the only podcast about political economy and anime. I am Ryan Salisbury.
I'm Chris Nivens.
Today, we're doing not the next episode in the series that we said we were starting, because we can never do a series all in a row, because it just takes too much effort.
We have betrayed your expectations coldly, ruthlessly, without remorse.
So today we're doing an episode on business participation in state surveillance, which is something I actually know quite a lot about, just because...
Because you're a scab.
Like most people that are now like leftists, it seems like it was the 2016 election or like just before that that kind of pushed them.
Yeah, right over the brink.
But for me, it was like it started with a little bit after the Iraq War, because I was.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going to say that I was woke immediately from like when the Iraq War started, because I was like 12
right,
or whatever. I guess I was like 13 or 14.
Your balls dropped, and so did your illusions.
Yeah, yeah. So like soon after the Iraq War started, there was all the counterterrorism shit.
Right.
I guess it was maybe before that too, a little bit. But
Yeah,
most of it was after.
For the states, it was definitely 9/11.
Yeah, it was after the Mission
Yeah.
Accomplished
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
I think it was like once they announced Mission Accomplished, and then the mission was not accomplished, they realized like we have to do something else, and they started doing this crazy surveillance state shit.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know how young our listeners are, but maybe a lot of them probably don't remember like the terror alert levels that they had like on the radio every day.
Yeah, fucking...
That shit was wild, man.
Like, what, all the way from, like, red up to...
It was never below yellow.
Yeah, exactly. It was always...
There was never like,
something-
oh, terror alert level blue. We're
Yeah.
fine today.
And it got to the point where we're like, everybody, kind of like wised up to that. They're like, oh, it's always going to be like orange or something. You know,
Yeah.
just fucking deal with it, which is basically like, that's the attitude you should have about life and the world around you, is that like, there's always risks. There's always perils.
Yeah.
Just don't be dumb about it.
I kind of feel the same way about the doomsday clock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that shit
Oh,
is
it's another minute next to doomsday, next to midnight, and you're like,
Yeah.
all right. I mean, who's fucking counting?
We're
these-
always going to have that one Russian guy who decided not to shoot nukes at the U.S.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't remember his name, but I should probably remember it, because he
Fucking
definitely
hero.
saved the planet.
Yeah, yeah.
Did a pretty good job of that.
I mean, like the doomsday clock.
Or maybe he made it worse, actually. Maybe if he launched nukes and like the U.S. and Russia nuked each other, then
Yeah.
everything would be fine now. I don't know.
we could just all be non-existent in peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But like my argument about the risk colors and doomsday clock and stuff is that like they have varying usefulnesses, I guess, is varying uses, levels of usefulness. Whatever, fuck it. But they're just as bad as any probabilistic measure, because there's always your black swans. There's always your like unknown factors, and so they're only as useful as like the paper you shit on.
Peter will be your best friend for using the term black swan.
Oh, it was like half of my degree.
Oh, really?
It's like I did an entire course on forecasting.
Wow.
And I was like, so immigrants and like their effect on imports and exports in Germany could be pretty good as long as they're taken care of and you pay them a living wage. You could even get some trade networks out of it. Unless they carry a virus in which case everyone will die.
I was going to say, unless Nazis use it as an excuse for doing whatever.
One might say that Nazism is a virus.
Yeah. But anyway, basically I was a communist by the time I was like 17 or 18. I don't remember exactly when it was. My friend in high school bought the Communist Manifesto as a joke, and I was like, I always wanted to know about communism. This was before Wikipedia was like really good.
Right.
I was still using it to teach myself everything that I was not paying attention to in school.
Right.
But I was like, oh, I'd like to borrow that, and I read it. I'm like, yes, communism is awesome.
This is the one.
I like this.
This is the one. Yeah.
And for a while, there was like this weird turn around the time that Occupy happened, because leftist ideology wasn't very prominent. It would have been pretty hard.
What's like they always say,
to know how to get like a good education in like leftist ideology. So what I ended up falling into is this thing called crypto anarchism, which was basically like libertarians that love cryptography.
Interesting.
And dark nets and stuff. So it's basically like libertarians now minus Bitcoin, but
right. But
they were a little more woke than that.
Yeah.
But not really.
I remember there was a lot of that swimming around. Actually, yeah, I remember that.
They all
talking about
loved,
let's set up our own fiber optics and let's like do this and that.
Yeah,
like our own distributed networks.
Yeah, they all loved the Constitution.
Right.
They all loved like what not
like,
crony capitalism, but real capital, genuine capitalism. Because we've never had real
red,
capitalism.
white, and blue minarchism.
Yeah. So yeah, I was in that for a while.
Like
I was on
like if Bookchin jacked off an eagle, like
I think it's more like if Sterner jacked off an eagle.
If Sterner, fell out of a capsule and we saw his real face finally.
Yeah. So I was on ITP for a while, which is like this dark net that's like Tor, but Tor times 1,000.
Okay.
But it's still mostly for pedophiles.
I was just gonna say it's obviously for child.
It's
porn,
mostly pedophiles, and then like a bunch of nerds that are like, we're gonna do a revolution and create real capitalism. So anyway, I knew a lot about surveillance because I was paying really close attention to surveillance, learning how to avoid surveillance and all that stuff. So I know a lot about like InfoSec,
how to
privacy.
write backwards in lemon juice.
Yeah. The topic of this episode is how business is involved in the state surveillance program, because there's plenty of stuff that you can listen to about how the state is involved in state surveillance.
That's the easy one.
PRISM and all that stuff. But
George Orwell.
Edward Snowden, WikiLeaks, etc. All that stuff. I haven't even read the actual intro that I wrote.
Well, let's take it off.
All right.
Take it away.
So we've been getting into more how the state is far more of an integrated organization of business and government than both common knowledge and orthodox political or economic theory let on. So I've talked a bit about how government spending inevitably goes to private organizations, such as through the government contracting system. I don't remember the episode, so it was like something about the state or businesses being like baby bureaucracies. I'll just put in the show description.
Whole. I remember that one vaguely.
Yeah.
The concept is rather intuitive once you get onto it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Rather intuitive.
Pretty good one. Check it out.
It's a good one.
So usually we think of things like creating the Obamacare exchange website or building weapons in terms of like government contracting and stuff like that. But there's a more insidious form of collaboration between business and government, which is when business participates in the surveillance of state subjects.
Yep.
So I'm just going to start by introducing a couple of important organizations that I'm going to mention a couple times. Actually, probably not even, but whatever. This is how I wrote it. Just whatever. So the first one is In-Q-Tel, which is the investment arm of the CIA, which, despite being its express purpose, remains legally distinct from the CIA. So it was created by the CIA. Its like mission statement is, we are the investment arm of the CIA, but it's not part of the CIA. Oh, and it receives all of its funding from the CIA. So it's connected in every way except for somehow legally.
Yeah.
They're not, like, if they did something wrong, then the CIA wouldn't be liable or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of bullshit.
That's strangely capitalistic.
Yeah. And despite being a not, like, classified as a nonprofit organization, its staff are able to, like, the staff are able to profit from the investments that it makes, which are funded through federal appropriations via the CIA. And the weirdest thing about that is they have this thing that's supposed to create like accountability for the people that are in charge of deciding which investments to take, which is they like put a portion of their salary into an investment fund. Like 20% of their salary goes into an investment fund. And so the idea is, if they invest in something, it's like, oh, well, part of that is my money, and so if I fuck up, then, I'm losing money.
Right.
Instead of like,
it's an incentive structure theoretically.
Yeah, but in reality, it's like we're
we're
a CIA organization. Whatever we invest in, it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
I'm never going to actually lose money on a significant level.
Right.
So, that's cool.
Yeah.
And the other one is just the NSA, which most people probably know, but just to give a brief thing on it. It's the other intelligence agency formed from a code-breaking unit in World War II. I don't know why I put one. Code-breaking unit in World War II, and inaugurated by the worst modern U.S. President, Harry Truman, with the explicit purpose of carrying out surveillance. So, like, I think the CIA is supposed to be, like, basically pays attention to global geopolitics and has, like, influence in it, but the NSA is just for surveillance.
Yeah. Creepy as fuck.
Yeah. So one of the things with because there is a bit of a separation between business and government, not as much as we normally think of, but there is like somewhat of a conflictual relationship because they don't have to just obey whatever the government says necessarily. They can resist. I mean, I think the same thing happens between different government departments.
I was
There's,
actually
like,
just going to say
jurisdictional
that.
conflicts and stuff like that.
You hear about these spats and
yeah,
whatnot,
exactly.
You know,
the CIA and the FBI probably don't get along that well and shit like that.
But I mean, if you kind of carry the logic of businesses being like independent bureaus of the government, you know, and or feudal states themselves, you know, depending on the kind of like the level of formation and development they've gone through, then that exactly mirrors the kind of bureaucratic disputes that you see in government.
Yeah,
right.
That's
and the
true.
competitions between feudal lords, for that matter. Where it's
Right.
like, well, technically, I'm your cousin's, you know, in-law, whatever the fuck.
Right.
And I'm subordinate to you, but I also hold this fiefdom that's really powerful, you know, so
Yeah.
I'm going to just fuck with your thing, you know.
Yeah, I guess the only like the main difference is like the government can use the court system and the legislative system,
Right.
whereas business, they're more about using the money, the
Leverage.
monetary system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they can do a lot more illegal shit,
Right.
and get away with it,
Right, exactly.
just by paying a fine or just not getting caught or whatever.
Exactly.
So sometimes businesses volunteer to participate in surveillance. Sometimes they're asked and agree without needing to be coerced. Sometimes they are coerced, and then sometimes they're not even aware that they're involved. So I'm going to go over some different examples of each one.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So a good example of voluntary involvement in surveillance would be a company that we've actually covered on here already, which is Palantir. So Palantir is a company founded by turbo nerd and litigious bloodsucker Peter Thiel.
Oh, that guy creeps me out.
Literal bloodsucker.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So the company's very name embodies how expressly it was created for the purposes of surveillance. So Palantir is named after a thing in Lord of the Rings. So the Palantir in Lord of the Rings
There's also
lore.
a shameful use of great literature.
Yeah, and also mixing genres.
Also mixing genres.
Because he names the company after Lord of the Rings, and then the divisions or the major projects after Superman and Batman.
Yeah. So he's a fucking moron.
So the most ambitious crossover event in history.
A very uncomfortable crossover event.
Way more
Yeah.
ambitious than Power Rangers
Yeah.
and Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, he's also either doing the whole like, you know, creepy ANCAP thing of like, oh, I like being evil.
Yeah.
You know, Darth Vader's a hero, or else he's like completely fucking unaware of the implications of the Palantir technology in the world that Tolkien created, which is that it's extremely risky and prone to corruption
Yeah.
and fundamentally not evil, but used only by evil powers.
Right. Man, so when Peter and I were doing... We were planning a bunch of billionaire episodes. We did the Peter Thiel one, and I don't know why I didn't do this. I was planning to act like Gollum for the Bill Gates episode. So I did Bill Gates as Gollum. So I did this whole thing like, we want the government contracts. Give it to Bill Gates. But I should have done
Yes.
Peter Thiel as Gollum because
As Gotham. We're going to
As
rename
Gotham.
Gotham because he's apparently fond of that kind of shit.
So anyway, the Palantir in Lord of the Rings lore is essentially a crystal ball that can be used to see any part of the world, which is thwarted only by darkness. Most famously used by the evil wizard Saruman.
Right.
So Thiel started this company to build a crystal ball for the real-life evil wizards doing post 9/11 counterterrorism and running corporate HR departments.
Yeah.
The two types of evil wizards. Yeah, so that would be a good example of like a voluntary surveillance thing. And
Super weirdly voluntary. Like, he just jumped right into it.
yeah, he was just like, I want to create a company that does surveillance.
Right, and then it comes out that he's, like, guzzling blood, you know?
Yeah, and it's weird. I remember learning about it when I was on I2P. Because people were talking about Palantir and how fucked up it was.
Right.
Because there was a bunch.
That's ironic.
That was like the, what's the current like boom that's happening for business, or like what's the most recent like tech boom that you can think of? Like rideshare apps, maybe.
Yeah, like rideshare.
It was like the rideshare app at the time because there was so many of these, like, especially in like computer security.
Yeah.
There's so much grift.
Yeah.
Because so few people understand it. It's so opaque. It's based on like this really archaic, weird, or not archaic, arcane math that no one understands.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to prove anything is secure.
Right, exactly.
You can only really disprove it. So like
exactly.
It was a huge grift at the time.
Cybersecurity is like theology.
Yeah, and it was especially relevant to me because in Northern Virginia, that's where most of those companies were based.
Right.
So yeah, I remember hearing about Palantir at the time, but I had no idea it was Peter Thiel, the PayPal guy, that did it.
Yeah.
Until like recently. So that's an example of volunteer. Another related thing. It's not related. Sorry, it's just another volunteer one. Is Amazon has a service called AWS, like their cloud service, AWS Secret Region, which sounds
weird.
It sounds like an anime attack to me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Secret Region.
AWS Secret Region. So the CIA contracted the cloud service starting mid 2012. Sorry. That's a terrible note. So the CIA basically asked for a secure cloud service to to store like secret documents with secret classification.
Right.
In 2012.
Right. And then sell them as Kindle ebooks for 99 cents a pop.
So they went through the bidding process, and Amazon bid on it in 2013. The contract was worth $600 million over 10 years, up to 10 years.
Damn.
So up until 2023, Amazon is going to be supporting this giant cloud for CIA documents, which is really cool.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I didn't really write anything else on that. We already have a good coverage of Palantir, I think, on the Peter Thiel episode. So if you want to know more about Palantir, check that one out.
Yeah.
If you go on the Podbean site, just click the billionaires tag. Or I think for the billionaires episodes, I put like individual tags for each billionaire. And then for the Mark Zuckerberg one, I put like 8 of them that were all making fun of his name. So go look at that. It's pretty fun. So the next group is quite a bit bigger. Companies that are asked by the state to carry out surveillance and then agree to do so. So the first example here is one that many people might know. They made a product that every single person listening has used, which is Google Earth.
God damn it!
Yeah. So the company that originally made this was called Keyhole. The ascension of Keyhole was a little strange. It was founded as a small company that was spun off of a video game company called Intrinsic Graphics. So they basically made this globe visualization. I think it's just like a demo of their game engine or something.
And then they're like,
oh, we could expand this.
Yeah.
So they spun off this other business that was like, they were trying to sell the visualization to like real estate developers or like realtors. I'm not sure which one it was.
Yeah.
Civil planning, defense, and intelligence organizations, so that like they could use it as like a computerized mapping software, but that was a globe, so it was spherical, which makes it cooler.
So I'm gonna just interrupt you here because this brings up a bitter moment from my adolescence in which before this Google Earth shit or this Keyhole shit ever came to light, at least in my social circles. I was just this geeky little kid with very few friends, if at all, and
I have no idea what that's like.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you missed out on a lot. Yeah. I was like, wouldn't it be cool? Computer graphics these days, they're sure coming along. We've seen like Phantom Menace or whatever. That was all right.
Yeah, I love the CGI in the movie. Yeah, it was really good.
But I was like, what if we got? Because I've always been this huge nerd interested in geography, world history, and like how things connect. And I guess that is why I'm on this fucking podcast one way or another. Besides being your lackey. But I was like, what if we had a visualization of like the globe, just like this whole concept, but the program.
But the problem is the Earth is flat.
Well, that's the first obstacle. Yeah, right. You have to somehow make a mathematical model for how the Earth might be round, and then you'd have to simulate that, and then you'd have to figure out how like the edges stitch together.
Yeah, you probably have to get in like Matroid theory and stuff for that.
Yeah,
so
and I can't do math.
Too advanced for me.
Yeah. basically, my idea was like, what if there was like layers built into it, that you could add, different kinds of data, different categories of data, like, oh, this is the layer where it's like roads and canals and shit, and this is the layer where it's like archaeological digs and other sites, and this is the layer where it's climate and stuff like. And I pitched it to like one of my dad's friends who like had worked in software before. I was like, wouldn't that be really interesting? And he's like, yeah, but who the fuck would use it? And now here we are.
Thanks, Dad.
Thanks.
So yeah, back to the ascension of Keyhole.
Yeah.
So the managers of the company decided that it would sell the software to CNN and give it a discount on using the software in exchange for just including its logo on air.
Oh man!
So they thought this was going to get them like 30 seconds of airtime total.
Yeah.
But CNN ended up loving it, and one person in particular, whose name I didn't write down because who gives a shit, used it extensively in the coverage of the Iraq War, which gave it a high profile that exploded its popularity. So because of this, it got a large investment from In-Q-Tel.
Oh, those guys.
Yeah, those guys.
Interesting.
And then soon after that, I was acquired by Google and integrated into Google Earth/Maps.
How did Google get it from In-Q-Tel?
There is a conspiracy theory that, and I tried looking into this for maybe like 10 seconds while I was researching this episode, but there is a conspiracy theory that Google's startup capital came from In-Q-Tel, and so Google is essentially an arm of the CIA.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you think about it, it is like one of the most valuable surveillance assets in the world.
Yeah, and they're all like banging each other.
Yeah, they know everything you want to know. They have all of your communications infrastructure, essentially. I mean, except for like, I guess not chat, but they have email.
Yeah.
They have voice over IP.
Exactly.
And then they have everywhere you go. They know everywhere you go.
Every
and then
step you take.
Every move you make.
Right.
I'll be watching you.
Yeah.
So the next example that I'll go over, which is lesser known, but it was the inspiration for this episode, was one that I found out through the Michael Brooks Show's excellent episode on Lula da Silva, the former president of Brazil, hopefully future president of Brazil, if we're lucky. And so in the 1980s, Volkswagen Auto Group and other auto manufacturers, it was actually Volkswagen do Brazil, but they're not really that separate from one another.
Right.
So.
It's one of these transnational things.
It's
like,
Volkswagen.
It's all the same fucking thing.
It's totally Volkswagen.
Right. Extremely coordinated.
Yeah, so they passed information about labor movement activities to the Brazilian government, which most people probably don't know anything about the Brazilian government. I definitely didn't until I listened to the Michael Brooks Show.
Portuguese. It's a particular kind of Portuguese.
Yeah.
Brazil was a colony of Portugal a long time ago. That's all I know.
They're like sempre do agora. That's how they talk.
That's weird. It's like,
but basically from I think it was from the 70s to 1992. I know it ended in 1992. Brazil was ruled by a military dictatorship.
Oh yeah, that thing.
Yeah. So
it's a lot different from Catholicism.
Yeah. Very different.
Sure.
So in the 1980s when this was happening, this was during the military dictatorship, which I don't remember quite what the government was like as soon as it ended, but basically Lula da Silva took over office in 2004, 2008. I can't remember, but he took over in the 2000s. So he's a far left candidate. He was a labor organizer during this whole situation. He actually, I don't think he worked for Volkswagen, but he was heavily involved in the labor movement at the time.
2003 to 2011.
Okay, cool.
That was him.
That was close.
Yeah.
That was my next
close.
guess.
Yeah.
I
mean, it had to be that if it wasn't the other thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Volkswagen was passing information about the labor movement, to the Brazilian military dictatorship. And not only did they pass along what they already knew just from like overhearing stuff or whatever, they were like very actively involved. They went out of their way to spy on the employees. So this is almost like blurring the line between like volunteer and being asked, because they went so beyond.
Right.
What's the first thing of?
With gusto.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
It's
above
like they really
beyond,
wanted
that's
to
what I'm thinking
relive
of.
their glory days.
Yeah, they went above and beyond on the surveillance.
Yeah.
So they actually like sent Volkswagen people to like spy on people. Like they sent them into meetings that were happening outside of the workplace.
Jesus.
And they wrote like
so typical though of like when workers try to organize or even educate themselves, you know?
Yeah.
Then suddenly a bunch of fucking creepy, like, whether it's thugs or like admin or whoever the fuck, just start to like lurk or like try to enter the group. You know, hey man, I see you're all eating bologna sandwiches together. You know, yeah, dude, fuck off. Like, we hate you. That's why we're here.
So while other companies were participating, Volkswagen was like doing stuff like giving extensive coverage and minutes of union meetings, which is really cool. So according to a Reuters article that reported on the story, I'm just going to quote the article. For example, Volkswagen reported on the showing of a film about the Russian Revolution at a union headquarters. So they went to their headquarters. They sent like infiltrators in. In a memo, VW described how workers blocked the doors to the projection room and deactivated the building's elevator to avoid a possible seizure of the film by the censorship department of the federal police. Well, those guys just sound paranoid to me.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Why would they go so far for OPSEC? Like, what the fuck, dude? That's crazy. So the memo noted that, quote, warm wine, popcorn, and chocolate were available at the screening, and it recorded the name of the worker who sold them. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know if they mean warm wine like room temperature or like they warmed it up.
Like mold.
Yeah, that'd be
fucking dope.
damn, especially in the winter.
Dude.
Actually, that sounds like Christmas food to me.
That sounds like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mulled wine, popcorn, and chocolate. Yeah. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
God, I'm so hungry. Not really.
Well, I mean, they were watching a film about the Russian Revolution, which is basically Christmas.
Yeah. Volkswagen also extensively documented a union rally I'm going to say on June 19th, 1983, that featured Lula da Silva. He was not a company employee, but was a rising star in the regional labor movement at the time. And by the way, I think he didn't really get very involved in this shit until he was like in his like late 30s, early 40s. So he's a good example of someone where it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still be like an important person.
Yeah, you can always
and,
jump
like,
in,
do
you know?
good shit or whatever.
Yeah, you could be like the heroic old person who like does the fucking, you know, the last deed of their life.
Right.
You know, for the cause.
Yeah. And so based on that, I'm not doing much right now.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
I want to save my energy.
Yeah, and I'll just do it when I'm like 35.
Exactly. All my BDE is actually stockpiled and gathering interest right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can really go out with a bang.
Yeah.
So they were like tracking that shit. There was warm wine, popcorn, and chocolate, which we were kind of oohing and ahhing over.
All right, I got
and this Lula guy.
I got it. Okay, so Volkswagen quoted Lula as criticizing the, quote, lack of shame of the government and encouraging workers to stop paying into a government housing fund as a gesture of protest.
Not bad. Little BS.
Yeah, Lula's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Look up a video of him because he has the most like distinctive voice of any politician you'll ever hear. Way more than Bernie, because Bernie you can do an impersonation of. If you try to do an impersonation of Lula,
you just sound like an idiot.
Your throat would just start coughing blood up.
Like that.
That's what he sounds
just
like.
Heavy metal.
Yeah. Yeah, he'd be a great hardcore singer.
It's awesome.
So the final line that I quoted here was the company Volkswagen recorded the license plate number of a bus that carried workers to Brazil after the rally.
Brasilia?
Yeah, I don't know why it says Brasilia. And the name of the company that operated it. So they were like tracking their movements, not only like what they were saying and doing and thinking and serving to the people that come to their meetings and who was serving it.
Yeah.
But also like where they were going. I guess the last part sounds a little bit worse than where they were going, but still.
Yeah.
Who was serving them popcorn?
Right. Like,
what a petty ass thing to track. Jesus
know,
Christ,
man.
dude.
That's the thing about surveillance, is just petty as fuck.
Oh yeah,
you know?
yeah. I mean, you got it. Like they just got to get everything, I guess.
Yeah. Just in case.
Yeah. So the final thing I have on this is some workers involved in the Brazilian labor movement would later be arrested and tortured by the junta. So like, that's what Volkswagen did. They like got people arrested and tortured.
Yeah. Those cute little bugs led to political torture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said that this happened in the 80s, but the later part of this article that I read kind of contradicts it, and I didn't think of it as I was writing the notes. But while this was all happening at Volkswagen do Brazil, there's evidence that the German parent company knew of the situation as early as 1979. So I guess it started.
So it started maybe in the
70s. Yeah.
And then moved through the 80s.
Yeah.
Shit.
Okay. So the next one, we have multiple examples from this. AT&T, which we have also covered before,
right.
The AT&T Time Warner merger.
Right.
So the first thing for AT&T, probably the most famous one, well, maybe not anymore, but definitely the most famous one prior to 2010 was room 641A. This was a room installed in 2003 and exposed by a unfortunately not famous whistleblower in 2006. It's weird how whistleblowers started becoming celebrities.
Yeah.
Around the 2010s.
Yeah. Did it start with Snowden? I can't remember.
Manning.
Yeah. Right. Manning and then Snowden.
Yeah. And I guess Julian Assange, he wasn't really a whistleblower, but he was famous for
being a kind of
being a whistleblower, facilitator.
Facilitator. Well, I think it was partly like, I mean, this all has to do with the kind of the second wave of dissent when things really started to crystallize, which is Obama and the global financial crisis hit at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is when the fucking GOP went completely batshit. It was already bad, but it went like straight through the fucking roof because they couldn't handle both of those things happening. I mean, really, like one of those things happening, let alone both. And then at the same time, of course, like the left started to crystallize, you know, and you saw Occupy and you saw other things, right? And so people like you were already kind of on it. I was starting to get on it. And then, I mean, I actually went to one of the earliest Tea Party rallies in my area because it was a dissenting movement.
Yeah.
And I went with a couple of my friends.
But it turned out to be all AstroTurf.
Well, it became AstroTurf at that stage.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I thought it started as AstroTurf.
Well, as far as I'm aware, and again, it's like murky shit. But at that stage, it seemed to be grassroots, and then it became co-opted by AstroTurf. Okay. Kind of like what so like Champagne Sharks was talking about, like the DeGray McKesson people taking over the Ferguson protests.
Right.
So it was kind of like that, where it's like real people with real fucking concerns
were
trying to voice their concerns. And you had some crazies, like we saw some weirdos talking, but it was literally like a round table of anybody in the audience or the rally who wanted to talk about what's going on and what's going wrong and what's been going wrong could talk. And there was like this Vietnam vet or two who were like, you know, I was forced to go to war and it fucked my life up, and like I want fucking retribution and reparation for that, you know. And some other people who are like, I'm a Native American. The government has to be brought to heel and held accountable. And then blah, blah, blah. And then like a year later, it was fucking Koch brothers.
I can just imagine him being like, I'm a Native American. I want reparations. And it was like, boo!
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. But then it was so like weird and eclectic, and like a lot of people were like kind of like small town reactionary types, like super Christian or like just kind of paranoid, like conspiracy theory type of people, you know.
Right.
But then like pretty much within a year, it was like more or less like an open secret that it was like a Koch brothers domain, you know.
Okay.
And so it was interesting.
So that's actually what I thought the whole time.
Right.
When I said that it was that
people,
I was testing you.
Oh, you were testing me
to make sure that you knew.
Because I was testing you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's why we get along.
Right.
You know, we're constantly trying to trick each other into saying something stupid and wrong.
So we're talking about AT&T. I'm sorry. I derailed this whole fucking thing.
Oh, that's fine.
Whistleblowers, right?
We're good at derailment. So, Room 641A. Exposed in 2006. It was also known as the NSA spy room because that is exactly what it was. AT&T helped the NSA install taps on its fiber optic lines so that it could monitor all the communications traffic going through AT&T networks. So they were just collecting everything indiscriminately.
Sounds super legit.
Yeah. And once it was discovered, there was a big backlash.
Right. As you might expect.
Yeah, I think they basically just got rid of it at that point. But obviously that did not stop the NSA from spying on people. They just,
right.
Yeah, they basically did what every, corporation and government body does when something bad happens. They just rebrand.
Yeah. Rebrand, regroup.
Yeah.
Redeploy.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they rebranded as the Hemisphere Project. So not satisfied with just one unethical mass surveillance project, AT&T managed to get caught just 7 years later doing the same thing for the DEA. And this was going on like for a while. So this time they gave the DEA metadata about phone calls dating back to 1987. And this one stands out in particular to me because it totally bypasses the supposed checks and balances that dopey liberals love so much. I don't know if they still love that shit. I think they're so focused on hating Trump.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they've gotten to the point where they want their own special form of like a summary.
Their favorite shit is the emoluments clause now.
Yeah.
That's their favorite constitutional thing.
Yeah, they want to get them on finances because they're obsessed with that shit.
Yeah, it used to be... Yeah, so liberals prior to Trump loved checks and balances.
I feel like at this point, neither party gives a fuck about like that shit, even though they always talked about it,
Yeah, and that might have even been like... prior to like Obama's second term, the checks and balances thing, because I haven't heard anyone mention that in a long time.
Yeah.
But anyway, everyone knows the idea of that, unless they're not American, I guess. So if you're not American, the idea of the U.S. government is supposed to be like, we have these three branches that form checks and balances against each other. Obviously, it's bullshit because the courts, the court system, which is supposed to be one of them, is a deeply reactionary system of
rigged.
Rich white men who can basically do whatever they want. Like any law Congress passes, they can railroad some court case that's tangentially related to it, and then just like make whatever decision they want, and then like every subsequent court decision that's made after that will follow that decision, unless it goes to a higher court.
It's like if you ever played that horrible game known as Monopoly, like it then
that was invented by communists.
Yeah, anarchists and communists.
Yeah,
and the original. There was a whole thing on Twitter about it. But basically, the original idea was that you would play it once and realize that it's like a horrible, horrible, horrible way to play. And then there was a way to fix it, which I can't remember how you fix it. But
don't play against your dad when you're a child.
Right.
That's the way.
Yeah, exactly. Don't play against the patriarch, basically, right? But like then there was this other weird like condition that you could add to fix the gameplay, and then then it was like everybody would win.
It was modern monetary theory.
Yeah, it was like, and then
instead of having a banker, you have a federal job guarantee.
Exactly.
Monopoly.
Monopoly.
All
over this shit.
So this Hemisphere Project operated in response to subpoenas rather than search warrants. So usually when the government wants to do surveillance on you, they get a search warrant, obviously until around 2003, 2004, when President Bush decided we don't need that.
Yeah.
Or I guess President Cheney decided we don't need that.
Right. God damn.
And so to contrast, this program operates in response to subpoenas, which are usually, if you don't know, it's like a court summons, basically.
Right.
I think there's another type that's like not exactly that, but that's the most common one.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't sound bad enough to you, I don't know.
That doesn't sound bad enough to you.
If that doesn't sound bad enough to you, consider that the DEA has the power to issue so-called administrative subpoenas that don't involve the court system at all. So, in other words, the records were just provided completely at the whim of the agency that could just unilaterally issue subpoenas.
Yeah. So basically, as with many things, kind of like executive orders, it sounds like this is the sort of like arbitrary decree that like an agency or an office or a bureau can basically use.
It's like some lowly Viscount giving writs.
Yeah, at their discretion, but the only thing that's basically holding them back is like a fear of popular reprisal or a reprisal by another bureau or whatever.
Yeah,
is that they're like,
which,
well,
like,
if we throw them around too freely,
to the DEA.
Yeah, right. So they're just probably just like printing this shit like money. You know?
Okay, so the last and most famous surveillance program from AT&T, well, partially from AT&T. Actually, it's not. This is just totally separate. I'm doing really good on these notes. All right, I'm just going to talk about it then.
Just go after it, man.
So probably the most famous surveillance program to date, I guess, is PRISM, which was brought to public attention by libertarian shithead / hero Edward Snowden. So
Snowden.
Yeah, I do think he's a hero, but he's also a libertarian shithead.
Yeah, you can be both.
Yeah,
it's a little
Look
rare.
Look up his Reddit AMA if you're ever interested in what political ideology he has. It's not very good.
Yeah. I remember. Oh fuck, I can't remember who it was, but it was some people on Reddit or something, or whatever the fuck. Back when like Snowden first came to light and all this bullshit, they were all these fucking like proto incels were like, oh my god, like this guy is so fucking cool and such a patriot. He like leaked all this information and fled even though he knew he was leaving behind his hot Hawaiian girlfriend. And you're like, wait, that's what you go with? You fucking asshole.
And then, like, 2 years later, Tinder was invented.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah, and then these people really got fucking cooked. Yeah, so PRISM.
PRISM was a massive surveillance program composed... Oh, sorry, is, because it still exists.
Right.
Didn't end. Is a massive surveillance program composed of many systems and utilizing many different data sources, including, according to this actually really shittily drawn diagram that I looked at, but it was on Wikipedia, so it's probably kind of legit. Including Google, Yahoo, YouTube, Facebook, AOL, Skype, and Hotmail.
So PRISM, that stands for...
because they just deserve it.
Well, yeah. So PRISM stands for pedophilia, racism, ignorance, sexism, and what?
Misogyny.
Misogyny. Right, of course, yeah. I always blank on the last one.
Yeah, I always thought it was penis retracting infrastructure for serving minors.
For serving minors.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was for sex masterminds, but
one of those. I don't know.
It could be a number of things.
Yeah, the government never declared an official version of the acronym, so
okay.
Yeah. Or at least, they didn't release it in their FOIA requests.
Right.
It's pretty much, I think what happens in that case, according to the Constitution anyway, it's up to the public to decide what the acronym stands for. And we're members of the public.
That's democracy for you.
And we're pretty much the only ones that are commenting on PRISM, so I think we have free reign to just decide whatever it is.
I think we've come up with a couple good ideas so far.
Yeah.
And between the two of us, we could vote, but we could never reach a majority, so...
That's true.
It's unanimous or bust.
Well, let's go with your first one. I think that was the best one.
Yeah. I think it really encapsulates the spirit of the mission.
Yeah. And especially of the NSA.
Yes. Oh, in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it began in 2007, late in the Bush administration. Okay. And was exposed by Edward Snowden in 2013. So it was going on for 5 years before it was even discovered. And there's no indication that it was stopped or even slowed by exposure. So because it was so public, we have numerous statements from congressmen that are still relevant. For example, I'm just going to pause this because I also have to pee. Unpause. Okay. All right.
Back. Hello.
Yeah, we're back. We decided to take a break because we both had to pee really bad.
Yep.
So, back to Prism and the reaction to it. So, again, I don't know why I have to say again because I paused. Anyway. So, because it was made public, we have numerous statements from congressmen that are still relevant. For example, fortunately dead old mass-murdering piece of shit scumbag John McCain said, we passed the Patriot Act. We passed specific provisions of the act that allowed for this program to take place, to be enacted in operation. So he had no fucking problem with it whatsoever.
Oh yeah, because he's
which is great.
Racist.
Yeah, but he's civil, so it's cool.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to honor his memory.
He shakes people's hands when he greets them, so he gets a lot of leeway.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and he sort of kind of stood up to Trump that one time, so
right.
He's basically in the resistance.
Yeah.
But
his sleeves are too long for his arms, even in death.
Yeah. And they'll never be, they'll never shorten because he can't lift his arms up too much. So.
Right.
And also he's dead, so.
He's dead.
Yeah.
He'll never fly
Which
again.
is pretty cool, if you ask me.
Yeah. It's
probably my favorite thing that he did was be dead.
I mean, him and William Henry Harrison.
Yeah. The two best politicians that I can think of because they're dead. So another one, sadly still alive, bloated corpse, Jim Sensenbrenner, architect of the Patriot Act.
Ugh, God.
So the one that John McCain loves so much.
Fuck.
That was actually that was the first thing that I remember hearing about. I remember sitting in my basement. Like the basement was like my area when I was living with my parents. I didn't live in the basement. I had like a bedroom.
You don't have to make excuses.
But I hung out in the basement. Yeah. No, but I would just go down there to like watch TV and stuff. And I remember watching.
Yeah, that's always how it is.
I started getting into politics.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching the news, and they were talking about the Patriot Act, and I was just like, "This is such bullshit!
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is this? They're like getting rid of all our rights and stuff so that they can spy on supposed terrorists. That like, how do we know there's more terrorists? There was only one 9/11.
Yeah.
So how do we know there's gonna be a bunch of other ones? What the fuck?
Right.
So yeah, this piece of shit was the architect of the Patriot Act. Still alive. Still, I think he's still a sitting congressman, maybe. I don't know.
I mean,
I could look it up, but I'm not going to. Just assume that whatever is the correct answer is the thing that I said.
Yeah.
So his reaction was, President Obama's claim that this is, quote, the most transparent administration in history has once again proven false. In fact, it appears no administration has ever peered more closely or intimately into the lives of innocent Americans.
Damn, Sensenbrenner.
Yeah.
You really
What a fucking cynical thing to say.
Yeah.
What a fucking piece of shit that guy is.
Oh my god.
And then finally, this is not all of the reactions, but this is the ones that I thought were interesting. Reanimated mummy Dianne Feinstein. So Dianne Feinstein said, these programs are within the law. Part of our obligation is keeping Americans safe. Human intelligence isn't going to do it.
Yeah, because these surveillance programs are designed by demigods and not humans. But I know that the terminology is, it's a jargon thing, but still. Like,
no better way to keep within the law and keep Americans safe than huge unaccountable bureaucracy spying on everyone indiscriminately, just collecting all of the data in the world.
Yeah.
So the major companies named at the time that Prism was exposed tried to do damage control by saying they don't provide government with direct access to their servers. And
what does that even mean?
And they comply with the law. So that means that
the law.
That means they didn't have a room 641A. That's all they're saying.
Yeah.
So they just wait till the government asks them to do something. They're like, oh yeah, well since you asked, sure, we'll provide all the data you want.
Right.
And then they comply with the law, which this was after the Patriot Act. So the law was, it doesn't fucking matter what you give the government. They can ask for whatever they want and demand, surveil anyone they want.
We comply with the law in the sense that we comply with these arbitrary decrees handed out by the agencies.
the precept of if we call you a terrorist, then that's what you are, and we can look at whatever we want about you.
Just decide.
Yeah, so it's cool that they followed some ethical standards there.
Yeah, good of them.
So even worse was the subsequent damage control through transparency reports. For example, in 2 reports that came out on the same day, Facebook and Microsoft both said there were thousands of requests made by law enforcement to their data, and I'm talking like 8 to 10,000 each, for each company.
Yeah.
But they were like, oh, but that's okay because it's only a small fraction of the users. So if you take 10,000 and divide it by the number of users that Facebook has, it's it's only like 1,000% or whatever.
Right. Basically, they're treating it like a fucking error report.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, oh, well, we have this many million users, so 10,000 out of that many million having their rights fucking stripped and abused. Like, that's not bad because it's just like an error report. It's just like a 404. We can fix those.
Right.
No, you can't fucking fix those. That's a violation of their fucking lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Disgusting and dumb. This is why STEM needs more,
ethics courses,
liberal arts and humanities courses.
So I'm a computer science major. I had to take 2 ethics courses. They were
good. I mean, they might have been dog shit, but at least
they were dog
them.
shit.
Yeah.
One of them, like George Mason was so proud of it because the professor was a lawyer who can code. That's what all the
fucking
CS department had.
That's all the lawyers do is code. You work with code called the law.
Yeah.
And then you argue about it with people who are just like you.
Yeah. And it was so funny because this was probably 2012. So there were plenty of examples from the 2000s and 2010s that they talked about. But they were talking about like, not ENIAC, but what is it? I don't even remember any of the shit, which the course worked really well. But it was stuff like, this company created this real-time operating system for medical equipment, and it malfunctioned, and people died as a result.
Okay.
So that's bad.
That's it? That's the lesson?
That's the ethics lesson. Make sure you make your real-time operating system work really good so that nobody dies in the hospital.
Oh Jesus! That's like
never mind that way more people die.
I was like,
from a lack of healthcare entirely.
I was at least expecting the fucking what do they call that? Like the railroad dilemma, the railroad problem.
Trolley problem.
The trolley problem.
Yeah, we talked about that.
The railroad dilemma. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the
you
first
did
course.
Okay, yeah, because it's the classic.
Yeah,
it's
so
like, how do you
the
make a
second
decision? And of course, all these coders are like, "Oh, that's a really good math problem."
Yeah.
Right.
The second one was the lawyer who can code, and the first one was like the basics, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Jesus.
But yeah, all the examples in that class, like all the actual cases, like court cases, were from the 80s and 90s.
Well, right.
So like totally fucking useless
completely
to modern times because. I mean, who gives a shit about like the software consultants like legal liability?
Yeah.
How about like, hey, you shouldn't write software that spies on everyone and sell it to the government constantly.
Exactly. Like our tech sector in general is such a horrific, cancerous example of the old adage, just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's just this constant barrage of a bunch of fucking like dick in hand doofuses running around going, well, I could probably write a script for that. I probably could. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But like you idolize Jurassic Park and you idolize Alien and you idolize all these fucking science fiction movies and you're missing the fucking point the whole time. That's why we have the NSA.
So, man, that was a long section. That was the asked and complied section plus PRISM. So now we get to the ones that were coerced. So the famous of this was fairly recent. The famous example would be the attempt by the FBI to compel Apple to crack one of its iPhones. So Apple very publicly resisted the attempt from the FBI because they said it would have compromised the security of every user's phone. Which I say that in a sarcastic tone, but I'm a software developer. I know quite a bit about computer security. And I absolutely loathe Apple, so you
Yeah.
know that I'm being serious when I say it actually would have compromised every user's security. Because basically what they wanted them to do was to create a modified version of iOS that could be installed on the captured iPhone as an update.
Yep.
That would unlock, it would like basically remove the passcode from the device so that they could retrieve the data. Apple didn't refuse to do this out of any like principled stance against government surveillance,
Right.
Because the FBI approached them about it, and they're like, oh well, if you want to break into the phone, here's like four or five things that you could do, if you wanted,
right?
And so they tried one of the things, which was like
it's probably a bunch of like FBI like TV suits standing in like a fucking corporate mall room, fucking whatever, back room of a mall with a bunch of Geek Squad guys, you know, with just the fucking iPhone right in front of the iPhone, and they're like, so like, if we wanted to get into this thing, and the Geek Squad guys are like, well, you know, I mean, customer service is our number one priority. And you guys seem like stand-up fellas.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Exactly.
So the suggestion that the FBI actually tried was iPhone said, oh, well, why don't you reset his iCloud password? And then you just get on his iCloud and get all his data from there.
Pretty simple.
So really caring about the security of the iPhone users, of course.
Right.
So that didn't work because, like every iPhone user, the San Bernardino shooter had not backed up his data to his iCloud in months. So they needed to unlock the phone in order to get the data backed up to the iCloud so that they could extract it. So to try and compel Apple to write this OS, the FBI attempted to use the All Writs Act, which I wish we had one of the Mike Tic guys on here now that they're not doing anything to explain this better, but basically it's an incredibly vague and ancient law. It's from like 1784, whose entire text is 2 sentences, so I'll just read the law in its entirety. A. The Supreme Court and all courts established by Act of Congress may issue all writs necessary or appropriate in aid of their respective jurisdictions and agreeable to the usages and principles of law. B. An alternative writ or rule nisi may be issued by a justice or judge of a court which has jurisdiction. So basically, this law is like the courts can issue any writ that they want in order to compel someone to obey a law.
Right. Which seems immaterial to the case.
More or less. Yeah. But I think the idea is they had a search warrant for the phone. Right. So they got a court to issue a court order to say, in order for this search warrant to be complied with, the manufacturer of this phone has to provide us with technical assistance in order to retrieve the data that we need. I think that's the theory behind it.
That's the idea, right?
Yeah. I might be wrong because I'm not a lawyer.
Right, and you're not an FBI agent.
But I am qualified to be a lawyer. I just haven't taken the bar exam.
Right.
Because I've studied law extensively.
Okay.
But that's my interpretation of it. So the U.S. government revived this law to use the court system to issue court orders, but not subpoenas, just court orders, to compel businesses to help them with anti-terrorism and narcotics cases. So in this case, the FBI got a court order to, again, compel Apple to create a modified version of the OS, blah, blah, blah. So Apple refused, saying it was against their policy, like their company policy, to undermine the security of their own devices. So... yeah, again, they didn't do so out of a principled stance. It was just well, technically our rules say that we're not allowed to do that, and I think our customers would get pretty mad. So, so the FBI ended up withdrawing the order eventually, but only because someone else had helped them unlock the phone. So there were rumors that it was an Israeli cybersecurity company.
Big surprise.
But then there was... Washington Post article that talked about it that had statements from anonymous sources that professional hackers found a zero-day exploit to unlock the phone, which I don't know. The Washington Post is pretty pro-Israel, so maybe they were just trying to run cover for them.
Yeah.
But then that's verging on anti-Semitic conspiracy territory, so I'm not going to say that
because obviously the only Jews that exist are Mossad agents and Hasids.
Right.
So, that's,
Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah. So, nonetheless, the FBI was able to access the phone, which contained nothing useful on it.
Nice.
It's my favorite ending to any of these surveillance
We had
stories.
our rights stripped for nothing.
It's just like, yeah, so the FBI tried to strong-arm someone, and then they failed, and then they finally got what they wanted, and it wasn't actually what they wanted because there was nothing there.
The real San Bernardino shooter was the futility of the abuse.
Yeah. So the last category is companies that are just unaware of the surveillance that's happening. They just provide the infrastructure, and then some other agency just sort of takes it over.
It's kind of
for this, we have to take a journey. We're going to take a journey across the Atlantic Ocean.
This makes me very nervous.
All the way. If you can imagine what's even over there. I can't, personally.
The only books that I've read involve this side of the ocean.
I don't even think we know what's really over there, to be honest.
It's been about 200 years since anybody was there.
Yeah.
They could all be dead. They could be ruins.
And I think it was the Vikings that last went there.
Yes.
To the far off land of Europe. 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 However you pronounce that.
I think it's Greek.
It's very exotic. But anyway, so this is in the far off country of England, or also known as the United Kingdom, that's bizarre.
It's
having
like
a
they're
king. Can
taking
you
a
imagine
little
that?
page from the United States.
Yeah,
sounds
like
plagiarism to me.
I mean, they basically stole the whole thing, except for they have a king, whatever that is. I'm not sure. So
sounds unconstitutional.
So the Britain has a spy agency that was originally created in the James Bond novels called MI6.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that's who was involved here. So they created a program called Muscular, and that's muscular in all caps because it's an acronym.
Because it's extremely muscular. Extremely muscular.
In fact, if you have your phone, look up what that acronym is.
All your muscles look like very, very swollen balloon animals, like fighting with each other.
But anyway, so the British had this program called Muscular.
I'm about to get a bunch of British gay porn, and that's okay. That's okay.
So let's just wait for Chris to find.
Or the UK's leading charity for muscular dystrophy.
Mm-hmm.
Or, man, that's actually the whole fucking first page.
All right, we'll just put it in the show notes then.
Yeah,
so,
damn.
This British program called Muscular involved spy agencies actually breaking and entering into Google and Yahoo facilities, possibly among others. I don't know. There's no way of knowing that.
Yeah.
To install surveillance programs. So I don't know if it's hardware or software. I'm not sure. So the program collected huge amounts of data, even more than the famous PRISM program that we just talked about. A major part of this program, this is hilarious to me, exploited the fact that when Google sent data through its intranet, so like if you use Google Drive and the data that you saved on your computer needs to be transferred to some other computer, it sends it through the Google Drive intranet, like the cloud intranet. And what they did to transmit this data, they stripped the encryption from the data and then sent it to the other computer, and then they re-added it before they sent it out like to the public internet. So the whole reason that this program...
You can't see the face I'm making, but it's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. So the whole way that this program worked was they didn't encrypt any of their shit like while it was in their own facilities. So the whatever British spy agency was just like, "Oi, governor, we can just walk in there and just put whatever thing we want on there and just take whatever we want. Walk out with it."
You know, I'm increasingly convinced. You know, and I have lots of great British friends.
That's what I'm gonna call people from England from now on.
Great British.
Oh, you're great British.
You beat me to it. Exactly. Great British.
Great. Well, I mean, you're the
Are
one
you
that
great British?
inspired it. We'd be especially good towards Irish and Scottish people. They'll love that one.
They're gonna love it. And the fucking Welsh. Yeah. We stripped the encryption from this joke so everybody can have it.
The British spy agency was like, maybe you should put encryption on that. And I was like, nay, bother. So yeah, I didn't write much else about that program, but so
it's too muscular to handle.
Yeah, I'm a little soy boy bitch.
That's
so
right.
I don't have any muscles, so just talking about stuff that's muscular makes me very intimidated.
I have muscles,
currently
but
pissing my pants, even though we just took a break so we could pee.
I have muscles, but they're just a bunch of Asian communist knockoffs, you know?
Yeah, all these weird Asian tattoos all over them. How are we doing on time? Because I think we might be able to skip some stuff.
Yeah.
You know what? It's not that long. I'll just cover it. So the Clipper chip was something that was invented in the 90s by the NSA. It was marketed as encryption hardware, but with a backdoor built in for spying agencies to use. So like there would be nominal encryption to protect your data, but like who is it protecting it from? Because the NSA had a way to
it's protecting you from yourself, guys.
It's kind of interesting the way that the backdoor worked, because when I first heard about it, I was like, "There's no way this could ever be secure." But actually, the way they implemented it is kind of secure, as long as you're not trying to protect yourself from government surveillance. If it's from anyone else. So what they did was, for every Clipper chip that was manufactured, it had a private key for its encryption.
Okay.
And the private key was put into this private key escrow by the company that manufactured it. And what they would do was, if there was a search warrant or subpoena or whatever for data,
then they could retrieve the private key.
Yes, they would get the private key out of escrow.
That's not so bad.
Yeah, it's not so bad, assuming that they don't just spy indiscriminately on anyone, which they absolutely did. So.
Right. Well, exactly right. Within the parameters.
So theoretically, it's a good idea, but practically, no, bad. And so the Trusted Platform Module is a chip that's in every computer that is supposed to be responsible for providing hardware encryption and computer security and stuff like that. But what are the chances that it doesn't have a backdoor in it? I think because the thing about the Clipper chip is it didn't sell. Nobody wanted to use it.
Right.
Probably because they marketed it overtly as like, oh, do you want to put a government surveillance device in your computer? Oh, you don't? Why not? What's wrong?
Why? I would never.
We won't use it unless you're a terrorist or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, you know.
And every human being on Earth, well, almost every human being on Earth, implicitly understands that rhetoric doesn't make fucking sense. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I'll never use it unless you give me reason to use it, and people are like, you're obviously thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right? Why the fuck would you invent something complex like that unless you were thinking about it?
Right.
Yeah.
So the last one is a story that just broke, I think today, actually. I saw it this morning. So this one's about China. So Bloomberg published an article today or yesterday about a chip used by China to spy on U.S. businesses. So this is both state involvement or business involvement in state surveillance and state involvement in corporate espionage.
Yes.
Which is pretty interesting.
Yes.
So I'm just going to read from the article because this part that I quoted is
only
not very
3,000
long.
words
The article
long.
is very long. I will include it so you can read the whole thing if you want. But I'm just going to read this excerpt. Nested on the server's motherboards, the testers, these are people in companies that are doing security tests of hardware. The testers found a tiny microchip, not much bigger than a grain of rice, that wasn't part of the board's original design.
They just had to compare it to a grain of fucking rice. Right. Nothing else. They could have been like, oh, not but bigger than a seed of barley or something like that.
Well, I mean, if you look at it,
fingernail
it's like,
clipping.
It really is like the size of a seed of barley. That would be a more accurate comparison.
You know. But because it's China,
they must be talking about short grain.
What do we know about China?
They must be talking about sushi rice because that's the only one that's the right size,
well,
or like sake rice, like 90% polished rice.
Right.
Amazon reported the discovery to U.S. authorities, sending a shudder through the intelligence community. And that's the U.S. government intelligence community, if that wasn't clear. Elemental service could be found in Department of Defense data centers, the CIA's drone operations, and the onboard networks of Navy warships. And Elemental was just one of hundreds of Supermicro customers. So the part I didn't include here is that Elemental made these servers out of chips made by a company called Supermicro, which is based in San Jose, California. But all their manufacturing stuff is in China.
That's fairly typical, yeah.
Yeah. During the ensuing top-secret probe, which remains open more than 3 years later, investigators determined that the chips allowed attackers to create a stealth doorway into any network that included the altered machines. So as soon as the server was put on a network, the Chinese state could just read whatever was on there.
Yeah, run roughshod.
Yeah. Multiple people familiar with the matter say investigators found that the chips had been inserted at factories run by manufacturing subcontractors in China. So the fact that, well, I'll get to this in a second because there's some interesting stats here. There are two ways for spies to alter the guts of computer equipment. One, known as interdiction, consists of manipulating devices as they're in transit from manufacturer to customer. This approach is favored by U.S. spy agencies, according to documents leaked by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. Thanks again, libertarian shithead.
Hero.
The other method involves seeding changes from the very beginning, which is a really stupid way to write, putting it in when you manufacture it. One country in particular has an advantage in executing this kind of attack. China, which by some estimates makes 75% of the world's mobile phones and 90% of its PCs. Still, to actually accomplish a seeding attack would mean developing a deep understanding of a product's design, manipulating components at the factory, and ensuring that the doctored devices made it through the global logistics chain to the desired location. Mm-hmm. A feat akin to throwing a stick in the Yangtze River upstream from Shanghai and ensuring that it washes ashore in Seattle.
Why Seattle?
I don't think that's correct at all. I don't think it's as hard as they're making it out to be.
It's not as hard as they're making it out to be.
There's no fucking way.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, first of all, you have to deeply understand the product's design. Like,
as if you
the Chinese state has to understand a product's design. The country with 1.5 billion people that all know how to work computers.
They literally just said that China makes 75% of the world's mobile phones and 90% of its PCs. But wait.
How are they going to understand the design of the product they're manufacturing?
These numbnuts Asians couldn't possibly engineer a sophisticated intelligence solution on their own.
They're just not the same species as whites.
Right. If it's good enough for Bloomberg. Yeah. But, I mean, this is the same writer who compared a chip to a grain of fucking rice.
What are the other obstacles they say? Manipulating the components at the factory. So walk into the factory and tell the boss, hey, put this chip on there.
If you don't, I'll put you in a dark room for the rest of your fucking life.
Well,
and the boss
that sounds
is like,
really hard.
Dude, I'm your cousin.
and then ensuring that the doctored devices make it through the global logistics chain. So the global logistics chain that does not include people who are randomly testing hardware for like,
right.
Oh yeah, the export center in Shanghai that like puts shit on a boat is gonna be like, I think we should run a hardware security test on that to make sure that it conforms to the original manufacturer designs.
Baton, yeah.
we don't want anything extra going in here.
That'd be weird for me personally. Yeah. Everyone on the docks in Shanghai is a sleuth.
I just read the next sentence and it's even worse. So this is a quote from
this
someone.
one was bad.
Having a well-done nation-state level hardware implant surface would be like witnessing a unicorn jumping over a rainbow, says Joe Grand, a hardware hacker and the founder of Grand Idea Studio, Inc. So,
okay,
no one invested in that business.
Exactly.
It sucks.
Whatever the fuck they do, they're run by an idiot.
Hardware is just so far off the radar. It's almost treated like black magic. Like, doesn't that undermine what you just said?
Yeah, yeah.
So, no one considers hardware. It's so far off the radar. Oh, how is that possibly going to make it through the global supply chain?
Right.
Full of experts in computer hardware and cybersecurity.
Yeah.
I can't possibly imagine that.
This guy must see a lot of unicorns.
Okay, so continuing. But that's just what U.S. investigators found. The chips had been inserted during the manufacturing process, two officials say, by operatives from a unit of the People's Liberation Army. So two army guys just walked in and just put the chips in there.
Yeah, that's exactly what this basically implies.
And I'm sure they probably don't know how to solder, so they're probably just like, here, put this in there.
It's probably one of those, what do you call those, with the little multi-prong, the units that just go right into it?
No, it's way too small for that.
Really?
Yeah, no, those multi-prong units. The multi-prong units have to be a certain size because there has to be some structural integrity to the wires that stick in there.
Just mash it.
Yeah, because otherwise it would just get smashed.
So they had one of those little tweezers or something?
Yeah, so literally what they do now, I don't know if they do this in Chinese factories, but this is what they do in like the really high-tech factories. They have these machines called pick-and-place machines.
Oh,
and there are these robots that just take it and they put it on there. And then what they do is there's... If I recall correctly, they have solder already on the component and already on the circuit board, and then they just put it in an oven. No, they put the whole thing in an oven. The oven melts the solder, and then that fixes the components of the motherboard.
Interesting.
So that's how that stuff works.
So what you're telling me and everybody who's listening is that we could spy on the U.S. from the comfort of our own home.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. All we have to do is get a bunch of sophisticated components and an oven.
All you got to do is be the Chinese state.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So because... Oh, wait. Did I finish this? Oh, yeah. Okay. In Supermicro, the company that manufactured these chips, or that contracted the manufacture of these chips, sorry. In Supermicro, China's spies appear to have found a perfect conduit for what U.S. officials now describe as the most significant supply chain attack known to have been carried out against American companies. and this wasn't mentioned in the excerpt, but this hit 30 companies at least. That was 30 companies that were named. And I have a feeling they hit some government agencies,
I hope
too.
there were companies like Grand Idea Studio Incorporated.
Apple, for sure. Apple terminated their contract with Supermicro. They said for unrelated reasons, but whatever. I think, was it Google that discovered it? I can't remember what I said 10 minutes ago. Anyway, some of them were defense contractors, too. So they were definitely getting government information to some degree. Yeah. I don't know if they actually made it into government agencies.
Right.
I'm sure that government agencies with high levels of security actually probably do hardware security audits.
Right.
If that's the correct term.
But you would assume that some level of penetration into the data would be useful to somebody in the intel in China. Like, they would be able to use it for something, Yeah. So, as long,
I mean, they know what they're making, right? At least.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's speculation, but you would imagine, like you said, they would know what they're making. They might know, to some extent, they might be able to access some of the documents related to that. Some of the, scopes and stuff.
Yeah.
All the shit that you and I are pretty much aware of from the administrative.
They would probably get detailed requirements of government computer systems and stuff like that. So because the U.S. depends so heavily on a foreign power for almost all of its computer hardware, 90%, or I guess 80-something% if you average mobile and PC hardware. So because of that, the U.S. can easily be spied on through that hardware. unless they carry out regular and thorough security audits.
I love the like just the sound of that phrase. The U.S. can be easily spied on.
Yeah, that kind of gives me hope for the future. And I will.
We're not just getting spied on by our own government. We're getting fucking raked over the coals by everybody else.
Yeah,
you know.
This will always make me laugh. China's response to this was so fucking perfect. I mean, despite being an authoritarian ethno state, I still kind of love them. And stuff like this is exactly why.
They've got a thing going.
Yeah. So their response to this was, supply chain safety in cyberspace is an issue of common concern, and China is also a victim.
That is so classic. That is so classic. How could this?
It's so fucking good, dude.
It's classic. Like, it's like deploying like outward bound doublethink. You know, like they know what the fuck they're doing, but they're gonna like fuck with your head. You know, because they're just gonna be like, wow, that's that. You know, this has happened. What a terrible predicament
Can't believe
you must be in.
Man, whoever did this.
You know, I mean, like, man, if I
we're gonna help you find them.
If it were to happen to me, I'd be pissed. I'd be pissed off. Man, you should really find that person. You know, here, let me help you look. Give me that flashlight.
Yeah, so I didn't really write a conclusion to this. I guess I probably should have, but basically the point is, it's so hard to separate business from the government, and especially from the more permissive term of the state.
You're right.
Or the more permissive concept of the state, I guess.
Right.
The state is business and government together.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like we were talking about, like legal constructions and whatnot, and that's so integral to the conjunction of economic and political activity, which is like business and government or state activity. Which is to say that like everyone talks about the free market in the States, at least, as like this,
which doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah,
it's a fucking fairy tale. Even in the best constructions, it's basically just, it's not even that it's utopian. That's completely different. It's that it's incoherent, right?
You know it's the only free market that exists? RuneScape. But not really, even, because the devs create it, so it's not really a free market. Nah. Nowhere does it exist.
Right. But like this free market that they keep talking about, you know, not only does it not exist as such, but what they're thinking of is, you know, this is the classic issue between, like, this is the beef that everybody has with, like, right libertarians, you know, ANCAPs, etc., people of that ilk, right, who don't generally realize, like, how fucked their theory is, if they have a theory at all.
Yeah.
Which is that they just assume, and it's often because of white privilege, white supremacy, they just assume that the structures that give life to capitalist enterprises are natural, right? Right, and that they sustain themselves despite any kind of countervailing, like, Hobbesian natural principles, which they also tend to believe in.
Yeah. I mean, I think there would be a tendency for that in any, like, if we were living in the Roman Empire.
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, yeah, everything about the Roman Empire is totally natural. That's how humans have always been.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so it's like this weird blindness to the, you know, the structural aspects of, you know, our society's paradigms and so forth, and those are essentially put in place and maintained by the more explicitly legal, political, monopoly on violence, etc. aspects of our society, you know, so that certain kinds of enterprises can thrive, you know, and that's the sort of dilemma, is that, you know, we as true leftists, I guess you could say, non-liberals, are, you know, we're interested in, well, what are our other options? What could we do instead? Because what we really want is a free world, you know?
Yeah.
And we're trying to
We want to get rid of the state.
Exactly. We're trying to theorize and implement what that would look like. And yet, you know, some of our bitterest opponents are people who believe they can get to a free world through like these weird shortcuts of just like, well, if you just like do away with regulation, and you're like, well, it's not that we don't want to do away with regulation per se, it's that we just don't believe that any of that is any good.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. It's kind of like I mean, to a certain point, it's almost like a form of purity politics, as much as I hate that term.
Right.
Because so obviously authoritarian right-wingers are fucked. They're monsters.
Yep.
Fuck them. There's no reason to ever entertain their ideology whatsoever.
They're the most explicit death cult.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if you go with, libertarian unity, you're on the side of right libertarians who want to get rid of half of the state, namely the government.
Right.
And if you're on the side of left authoritarians, then you're on you're on the side of someone who wants to get rid of the other half of the state, which is the business part.
Right, yeah, said in that way, yes.
Right.
Exactly.
So they don't care about getting rid of the government, they just want to get rid of business.
Right. They want those functions. This is the
and
interesting thing
really
about,
not even because I mean they only want to get rid of capitalist business because like the Soviet Union had businesses
for sure.
It was just that they were like state owned, state sanctioned,
which is
state
what
managed.
I was going to say is like they want to absorb those functions into like it's like they kind of
moving it from one unaccountable bureaucracy to another.
Right. They understand to some extent that like this idea that businesses are like organs and or like children of the state.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're kind of step.
But it's actually good.
Right. Well, to them, because they're kind of from this older notion that like the state and the nation are essential to social life. Right.
Right.
Which is where that split happened with the anarchists and so forth, right? Then their instinct...
The part where they murdered or imprisoned all of them.
No, that never happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, yeah. If you say it did, I'll shoot you. But it's like they understand the fundamental problem of allowing these things to run rampant, but because they believe that the state is essential to social life and to like the guarantee of rights and things, right? Which is a kind of, and I don't equate communists with liberals like some people might, but I do see that they have some of the same fallacies. And I know that anarchists and liberals often have the same fallacies in other ways. Right. So, of course, we have to be very careful about these things, and I have plenty of communist friends too and so forth. But
it's almost as if there's overlap between different ideologies.
It's almost as if labels are only slightly useful. Yeah. And that individuals and collectives are mutually responsible. But... it's like they want to absorb those things because they understand there's an accountability problem. But then because they believe in the state as like the government sort of political and party aspect of the state, then they think, oh, well, we'll just make those things explicit bureaus or like subdivisions of the state. Yeah. Right. Instead of letting them run ragged and so forth. But then you get this other thing entirely, which we've seen where there were really good aspects of the Soviet Union that like I think a lot of people miss that have living memory of it, but there were also horrific things that happened. Yeah,
but only to landlords.
Only to landlords.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that the moment I say something incorrect, I will magically become a landlord. Yeah. But let's not shy away from a critical discussion of the U.S. puppet state of Rojava. Because clearly they've probably massacred a bunch of communists and capitalists.
Yeah, have you heard about the U.S. military bases in Rojava?
Ooh, no, I haven't. You should.
Oh, you haven't?
Me. Yeah.
Well, guess what? There's U.S. military bases in Rojava.
Well, fuck.
Did you know that?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Did you know about the U.S. military bases?
Oh my
God. They're in Rojava.
Oh shit.
They're the U.S. The U.S. military.
Oh shit.
And they were in Rojava.
But I thought.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Really?
Nope. Stand with Assad.
I had all these ideas.
Stand with Assad.
You know what? You're right.
Yeah.
Assad.
Yeah, he's woke. Yeah. You know that because he's in the Ba'ath Party, which is socialist because that's what it says.
Yes. Right. It says as long as anybody says they're socialist, then they are socialist. Yeah. Right. We learned that lesson a long time ago.
Like the National Socialists.
National Socialists.
Those guys. Yeah.
Yep.
Who the Soviet Union sold a billion tons of oil to. Right. But only to defend the revolution. So it's fine.
Right.
Whatever.
Right. Let's never forget Hashtag never forget.
So in conclusion, to sort of contradict what I said earlier, both business and the government are part of the state. And if you were an anarchist that believes in taking state power in order to build a movement to overthrow the state,
right,
which seems contradictory, but I don't think it really is, because the state is so incredibly powerful that I don't think there's a way to overthrow it without having some portion of its power.
Yeah.
Then you should be concerned with both electoral politics as well as industrial politics, aka business.
Right. Yes.
And I think that's the main takeaway that I would say from this episode.
Yeah.
If that was a coherent sentence.
They're watching us
which I don't think it was.
deeply. Yeah.
So anyway,
we just ran with this one, guys.
Yeah. It's getting late.
It's getting very late.
Anyway, so if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and check out our other episodes. They are at neighborscience.podbean.com.
Mm-hmm.
We have a Twitter account at neighborscipod, and then all of our other accounts are Neighbor Science. So we have a Facebook, Patreon, Instagram. They're all Neighbor Science. And I also have the Post Scarcity Magazine website, which is no longer being used to host a podcast because otherwise I'd have to update it in 2 places, which I'm just not going to do.
Right.
But it still has the Post Scarcity Anarchism zine. There's one article in particular that I link all the time, which is an intro to Capitalist Power. That is in volume 3. So check that out. If you've never heard of Capitalist Power, you should read that article. It's probably the briefest summary that there will be for several years of Capitalist Power, I think. And I think it's a good intro, and I wrote it, so you should read it because I'm a cool person, and
he's a cool person.
It's good to read stuff that I do.
It's good to read stuff that he does. I have to say these things, or he'll shoot me.
Yeah. So on that very coherent end note there, bye.
Bye. Damn. 2 hours? 19 minutes. Damn, shit.